Woohoo! Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Count on Cities 92.9. Canada surrenders and Trump wins again. Okay, I knew that this wasn't going to go well for Canada. We talked about it yesterday. They just didn't have the leverage that they thought they had. Okay, so after one phone call with President Trudeau, or Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau, and President Donald Trump, they had a phone call. This was announced. It's a $1.3 billion border plan. Nearly 10,000 troops will be dispatched to safeguard the border under Trump's pressure. Trudeau concedes 30-day delay on U.S. tariffs. U.S.-Mexico, they also are going to be deploying, I think it's like 10,000 troops to the southern border to combat crime and the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. This is huge. This is awesome. So Justin Trudeau, he says this. He tweeted this out, I think. He says, I just had a good call with President Donald Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. So this is why Trump was doing this in the first place, where we are not going to get shafted anymore, the United States, okay? You're not dumping your government-subsidized lumber into our country and outpricing the American lumber industry and violating your trade agreements. You're not going to pretend like you own us with your raw oil that you've dumped into the United States that we get now at a discounted price. But we really don't need it, folks. We've got our own Bakken shale pipeline that we can refine that oil. And there is no dependency on Canada for our oil. There is no dependency there. And to pretend like you are, giving us gold when really we have to refine it ourselves. You couldn't refine it even if you tried. But even if you tried, you couldn't transport the refined oil to the United States. So Trudeau goes on here. He says nearly 10,000 frontline personnel will be working on protecting the border. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. So they're going to be appointing somebody to take a look at the fentanyl pouring into the United States from that northern border, Canada and United States border. We will list cartels as terrorists. So Justin Trudeau is sounding pretty based here because Donald Trump forced him to be. Okay, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border. We're also going to combat organized crime, fentanyl, money laundering. I've signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused. So this whole trade war is over, essentially. This was Trump knew exactly what he was doing. This was negotiating. And look, fast forward to 2025, here we are. Mexico is paying for border security down at the border because Mexico is doing essentially the same thing. And this was all planned and thought out by President Donald Trump via these tariffs. I love tariffs. I love how he does it. I don't know if another president would be able to do it this way. And we've got a bad taste in our mouths. I think it was after the Great Depression era, it kind of ultimately led to the Great Depression era. The president back then had tried to implement tariffs to try to get us out of the Great Depression, and it just, sent us down a downward spiral, and it was made it much worse. Okay, so you have to know what you're doing with the tariffs. It's a negotiating tactic. You got to come with an outrageous tariff. And then they're going to be like, oh, wow, I guess we're going to have to do what you say. And Trump is just so good at negotiating. It's the art of the deal. It's the art of the deal. So essentially, the trade war is over. Okay, a trade war. It was never even a trade war. I told you that none of them had any leverage at all in the United States, has all the leverage. Because we pay for everything for them. I mean, they don't pay for their own military. They don't do any of that. Canada, and they weren't paying for their own border. Now they're paying for their own border. And guess what, folks? The tariffs are paused for at least 30 days. while we work together. That's what Justin Trudeau says. We've got so much to get to this morning. Find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. A Democrat congresswoman, her name is Jasmine Crockett. She was just sworn in, and at her swearing-in ceremony, you guys won't believe it, but I believe it because she's a leftist, she immediately starts to suggest Trump voters are all white supremacist. The people on the left do not want to come together. They do not want to unify. And this is example number 2048, right? 2048, like Exhibit Z. Here we are, Jasmine Crockett and her objective stupidity. She doesn't have a shortage of foolish things to say here, folks. No serious person could vote for somebody like Representative Jasmine Crockett. But we're going to get to that here in just a second. I also want to talk about the DNC chair candidates. All of them blamed racism and sexism for Kamala Harris losing. So that happened over the weekend. There was a vote for the DNC chair and the DNC vice chair, both of which are just terrible. Number one, the current DNC chair, he obviously blamed racism and sexism for Kamala Harris's loss, which is just so stupid. They will never look in the mirror. They'll never look in the mirror. That's why they lost, because they kept pointing fingers at people and calling them racists and sexist, and that doesn't go over very well with the American people. So we're going to get to that, plus Hakeem Jeffries, violent threats against MAGA. He promises that he's going to take the fight to Donald Trump in the streets. The fight against Donald Trump, he's going to go to the streets and take the fight there. When are they going to learn? Like, this sort of behavior and this sort of rhetoric contributed to 2 assassination attempts. We're not talking 1, 2 assassination attempts against the president, Donald Trump. So it's like, when are they going to stop? And when are we going to unify? These people don't want to unify. Donald Trump, after signing the Laken Riley Act, had a very sobering moment. Like, it's very hard. I think Donald Trump, his ego has definitely taken a back seat. He's definitely not Donald Trump 2016. But he, in very nonpartisan way and in a very bipartisan way, he got up there and he thanked the Democrats who voted for the Laken Riley Act. Our senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth didn't vote for it in the Senate. Disgusting. But he thanked the Democrats that did. And he was very serious, and he was very, very unifying and trying to be as bipartisan as possible with these people. I mean, obviously, this was the Laken Riley Act. She wouldn't be dead unless it wasn't for the Democrat policies, and I truly do believe that. But Donald Trump was trying to make amends, really, or he was extending an olive branch by being really sweet, or being really nice to the Democrats after they had voted for that, and he was, a message of unity. So let me get to Jasmine Crockett here. At her swearing-in ceremony, she appears to be between, I like to say this, between the first stages of grief and the second stages of grief regarding the presidential election. She's stuck between the first stage of grief and the second stage of grief, okay? At first, she tried to rationalize Kamala Harris's loss here by claiming that people should have voted for her, that nobody's perfect, and that you should vote for her anyway. And she claimed that, yeah, she's not perfect, but people should have voted for her anyway because it was important. Several minutes into this unhinged rant, however, she turned it into a racial issue. And she started citing statistics, okay? And she claimed that 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists, which is just not true. Take a listen to this unhinged rant by Jasmine Crockett. Like I said, she's stuck between these stages of grief here. She's trying to rationalize Kamala Harris's loss. Then she blames you and says that you're racist white supremacists for not voting for her. Take a listen. Here we go. Here we go. Hold on.
Y'all.
Yeah.
It's getting real.
Y'all, it's getting real.
It's been 8 days. 8 days, y'all. 8. And we were only in for 3 of them. It's been 8 days. And honestly, I don't know how else to describe this other than evil. It's evil that is literally sitting in the highest seat in the world. The idea that Head Start does not know whether or not they will have their funding, the idea that the Medicaid websites have gone down and gone dark. I'm trying to tell y'all that whatever we do going forward, we need to recognize that there is no such thing as perfection that is walking on this earth. And I think some of us got caught up. And because we didn't have our perfect candidate, some of us decided that we would stay home. Some of us decided that we couldn't talk to our friends and our kids and explain to them that you still love your spouses even though they're not perfect. Some of them just didn't fully understand the threat that existed. But I am here to tell you, not to make you fearful, that it's time to buckle up, Buttercup. Because they were allowed to divide us. They were allowed to make people who didn't necessarily understand or agree with trans folks say, well, never mind, I'm not gonna vote. They were allowing those that said, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that doesn't include me, not realizing that if you are uniquely abled, or if you're a woman, or if you are from rural America, or if you're a veteran, all of these are categories that qualify under diversity, equity, and inclusion. Listen, I'm gonna try to be uplifting, but I got to be real. We gotta stick together. And even I appreciate y'all reelecting me. I'm sure I took some votes that somebody in here got a problem with. Because no one is ever gonna agree 100%. But as a baseline, in this country, we always had morality. We always had people that at least knew right from wrong. Right now, we are living in the upside down. They're complaining about the people that are trying to make sure that we can have food on our tables or make sure that we can have a roof over our head, while allowing those that went through due process and were absolutely convicted and absolutely given sentences, we're going to release them. And by the way, since I now serve on judiciary, my first hearing was immigration. And I know there's a lot of propaganda that's out there. But one of the things that I made clear is that it's not immigrants that are committing all the crimes. I get that you can find any random criminal in any race. I just want to be clear. But going out and finding one terrible situation and then taking a paintbrush and saying this applies to all of them is wrong. Let me make sure y'all got the facts. Most extreme crimes that take place in this country are committed by white supremacists.
Okay, so I know that was a little bit long, and I'm sorry that you had to deal with that, but what kind of representative first starts out her speech with, y'all, it's getting real? Like, have some class. According to the Post-Millennial, noting that she now serves on the House Judiciary Committee, and her first hearing was on immigration, Crockett, she told this crowd, I know there's a lot of propaganda out there, but one of the things that I made clear is that it's not immigrants that are committing the crimes. There's several things wrong here with what she's saying. Nothing out of her mouth really is making any sense at all, but the fact that she claims there's a lot of propaganda out there while proceeding to spout out a bunch of propaganda in the same breath, there is a lack of self-awareness here that is just so... It's only possible for Democrats. It's only possible for Democrats to have this kind of psychological projection. So she says this, quote, you can go out and find any random criminal of any race. I just want to be clear, but going out and finding one terrible situation like in Riley, and then taking a paintbrush and saying this applies to all of them is wrong. Look, none of that happened. Okay, firstly, Donald Trump is not going after immigrants. He's going after illegal immigrants. He's targeting right now criminal aliens. So on top of the crime of entering the country illegally, you've also committed another crime, say theft, sexual abuse, assault, murder, whatever the case is. Thirdly, secondly, she's talking about immigrants. Immigrant is not a race. Okay, whether you're white, brown, black, it doesn't matter what country you come from. If you're here and you enter through an illegal port of entry, and then you also, on top of that, committed crimes, you're getting deported under Donald Trump's border czar Tom Homan. Okay. Thirdly, no one ever said anything it is that she claims. No one ever said, that immigrants are the only ones committing the crimes. Nobody's ever said that at all. Now, any crime committed by an illegal immigrant is a crime that could be prevented, which is why the mass deportations are taking place. They're crimes that shouldn't be happening. So we're trying to combat that, obviously, with deportation. She continued, she says, quote, "Let me make sure y'all have the facts. Most extreme crimes that take place in this country are committed by white supremacists. 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists in this country." And then she goes on here. She talks about January 6th. Do you know who went up there on January 6th? White supremacists. This ain't me telling you. You can Google this if you don't believe me, but it was the Oath Keepers, it was neo-Nazis and the Proud Boys. Now, Proud Boys, the leader of the Proud Boys, by the way, is a brown man. They're all white supremacists. No. Well, some of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers are brown, black, white. It doesn't really matter. It's not like, you have to be white in order to be in the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys, okay? The Proud Boys leader is brown, okay? So the fact that she stated this is just insane. The audience, and make sure you get the facts. I want to make sure my audience gets the facts. This is a mockery of Americans' intelligence everywhere, okay? Of the 7,964 arrests for murder and non-negligent manslaughter in 2019, this is the worst crimes. The latest crime in the United States report available, the latest report available by the FBI, 4,078, or 51%, were black suspects. Okay, while 3,650, or 47%, were white suspects. Okay, in addition, 125 were Indian American or Alaska Native, 83 were Asian, 28 were Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. Okay, so no, the worst crimes, the most extreme crimes, murder, 51% are committed of the murders, of the 796 or 7,964. Sorry, it's early. 7,964 murders. Okay, of those, over half are committed by black suspects. These are the numbers. Okay, these are the facts. And she didn't go up there. And she didn't provide you facts. She lied. I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Okay, yeah. Oh, I love this. Harold, thanks so much for commenting. They blame racism and then they elect two white guys as their leaders. So they blamed racism and sexism as to the reason why Kamala Harris lost. So you would think that they would, I don't know, elect DNC chair and a vice chair who are brown and black or of a different color of white, right? And not men. Racism, sexism, they're two white men as their leaders. So if that's the reason why Kamala Harris lost, you're probably, if that's really what you think the reason why Kamala Harris lost is, why would you elect two black or two white guys to be your DNC chair and vice chair? It doesn't make any sense. Let's finish this up. She talks about the J6ers here.
80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists in this country. Do you know who went up there on January 6th? White supremacists. This ain't me just telling you.
Okay, so one thing I want to talk about with January 6th is that nobody was charged with murder. Nobody was charged with, insurrection. Nobody was really charged with, people were charged with terrorism. Nobody was convicted of it. And they are all pardoned. Okay, this is a sweeping pardon that was signed by Donald Trump. None of these crimes, a vast majority of them, by the way, were misdemeanors. We're talking trespassing and disorderly conduct, okay? Maybe destruction of property, okay? That's what we're talking about here. The worst of the worst, you probably had like felony assault on a police officer. There was no attempted murder. There was no murder charges. There was no insurrection charges, nothing like that. So to suggest that the January 6th incident was extreme crimes, because that's what she's doing here. She's saying that the Jan 6 crimes were extreme crimes, that they were committed by white supremacists. Not true. Actually, the Proud Boys, who did see probably, and the Oath Keepers, who probably did see the felony charges, those guys, a lot of them are brown individuals. Like I said, I think his name is Enrique, the leader of the Proud Boys. Yeah, Enrique Tarrio. Okay, so he is quite literally a brown man. Enrique. Okay, Tarrio. He's a brown man. So I mean, yeah. So to suggest that the Proud Boys, led by a Mexican man, are white supremacists, or a Hispanic man, to suggest that they're the white supremacists of this country is absolutely insane. The leader of that group is brown, number one. So those guys, they probably had your felony assault on a police officer, something to that effect. They were pardoned, or they had their sentences commuted in those cases, a lot of the time, because they had already served like 4 years. Like, we're talking about people like in the streets of Chicago. You will get a slap on the wrist for doing a drive-by shooting. Okay, that's quite literally what goes on in Chicago. You can quite literally get away with murder in the city of Chicago, in the city of New York City. So, and these people had already served 4 years and look at the 2020 BLM riots. Okay, those people were quite literally assaulting police officers and screaming to defund the police, and screaming that the system is broken or whatever. And they were going after business owners. I mean, and setting fires to targets. Right? I mean, this happened. And those people got slaps on the wrist. Meanwhile, you had, for example, there was a gentleman who tased a police officer. He had already served 4+ years and paid fines for this crime. Okay, and he was, I think he might have had his sentence commuted by President Donald Trump. He had already served time. 4 years for, assault of a police officer. And like I said, on the West Side, there are Capitol Police officers, and there's video of this, that were definitely instigating, and they were the ones that were attacking the J6ers, and the J6ers were just simply trying to defend themselves.
You can Google this if you don't believe, but it was the Oath Keepers. It was the neo-Nazis. It was the Proud Boys. They are all white supremacists. So while everybody said they voted based on the price of eggs, I got news for you. They're not going down no time soon. They've hit record highs. So for all your friends that's complaining, I need you to remind them that elections have consequences, and it's not just the presidential, because I'm going to make sure y'all know who all these mayors are and who all these city council folk are, because y'all need to make sure you're paying attention to what they're doing too.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Good morning. Hey, you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. Jasmine Crockett, I'm sorry, we've got to fact check you. She says that 80% of extreme crimes are committed by white supremacists. Not true. The most extreme crimes, murder and non-negligent manslaughter, okay, in 2019, which is the latest crime in the United States report that's available, of the 7,964 arrests for murder and non-negligent manslaughter in 2019, 4,078 or 51% were black suspects, and then you had 47% who were white suspects. So she's lying. Also, extreme crimes. What are you talking about? The vast majority of Jan 6ers. She talks about Jan 6 as well. She goes, what color were all of the Jan 6ers? They were white supremacists. And then she mentions the Proud Boys. She mentions the Oath Keepers. The Proud Boys leader, folks, he is Enrique Tarrio. He's a brown man, okay? And there's members of the Proud Boys who are black, brown, white, it doesn't matter. And the Oath Keepers. Number one. Number two, the extreme crime she's talking about on January 6th, we're talking disorderly conduct. Mostly, a vast majority were misdemeanors. Some of them were felonies. And those people serve time. Like, we're not talking felony murder. We're not talking attempted murder. We're not talking, these people were not charged with insurrection. Okay. They served their time. Some of it was like assault on a police officer, okay? And they've already served their time. Look at the city of Chicago. People are quite literally getting away with drive-by shootings there. And then you look at J6, these J6ers who were charged with felonies, they've already served their time and paid their fines. It's been 4 years. In Chicago, if you hit a cop or you assault a cop, likely you're getting a slap on the wrist. Okay. So in all of these liberal cities, Chicago, New York, LA, whatever, you can go assault a cop and you probably won't even see the inside of a jail cell. These people, J6ers, they assaulted Capitol Police officers. Allegedly, a lot of them probably were defending themselves against the attacks of the Capitol Police officers. But, they had to serve 4+ years plus pay all kinds of fines, okay, in a prison without any toilet paper in some cases. So that's what we're talking about here. That being said, Crockett, she would sound a lot smarter if she were just to keep her mouth shut. She proves her ignorance every single time she opens up her mouth, and any chance she gets, she tries to prove how ignorant she really is. I want to shift gears. Let's talk about this. Somebody in the chat, you guys can always find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Harold, he says this: they blame racism and then they elect two white guys as their leaders, the DNC chair and the vice chair. Yes, that happened over the weekend. And I want to talk about this because the Dems need to take a look in the mirror. And I don't want to even help you guys, but you guys really need to take a look in the mirror. Stop calling half the country racist and misogynist, okay? After your 2024 loss, that's why you lost 2024. You're doubling down at the fullest extent, and it's embarrassing. You guys need to take a look in the mirror. The reason why Kamala Harris lost was not sexism and racism, but every single one of these DNC chair candidates raised their hand when they were asked, do you think that Kamala Harris lost due to racism and sexism? Here's what it sounded like over the weekend. All of them, all of them, all of them rose their hands.
That's good. You all pass in this round. So okay, I'm going to, I have a show of hands. How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat?
Every single one of them. And, you passed. So you've got the media. So I think this guy's from MSNBC. You've got the media approval here where, yes, you passed. Okay. So it's really disgusting. Ken Martin, he's the longtime leader of the state Democratic Party of Minnesota. And he's the newly elected Democratic National Committee chair, and he won Saturday's election. Now, the newly DNC vice chair, David Hogg, guess what he did? Previously, he's called for the abolishment or abolishing ICE, Okay, he wants to abolish ICE, and he's called for defunding the police. Very, very extreme individuals. Okay, both Ken Martin and David Hogg. David Hogg a little bit more so. He's a younger guy. They're all extreme. Every single one of them. Every single one of those candidates is super extreme in that they believe that Kamala Harris didn't lose because of any other reason, because she was a woman and she was of color. I don't even want to say she's black because there's discrepancy there as to whether or not she's African American. Okay, so according to Albert Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Subsequently, we can conclude everyone in this video is objectively insane. You keep saying that half of the country is racist and sexist. That didn't go over very well in the 2024 election. That's why you lost. According to Daily Caller, this is what MSNBC, and his name is Caphart. That's his last name. I don't really know who this guy is. I think he's from MSNBC, and he asked the question, do you think misogyny played a role in Vice President Kamala Harris's defeat? All 8 contenders, and I'm going to ramble them off: Democratic Governor Martin O'Malley of Maryland, State Democrat Chairman Ben Wickler of Wisconsin, Ken Martin of Minnesota, former Democratic Mayor of Rahm Emanuel, Mayor of Chicago, so he was a former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, he was running. And then you had the former presidential candidate, Marianne Williamson, raising their hands in response here. That just goes to show you how far the Democrat Party is, how far gone they are. And then Capart says, okay, so good, you all passed. None of this makes any sense because Donald Trump got 46% of the Hispanic vote, 40% of the Asian vote, 13% of the Black vote. Trump supporters are not racist. They are not sexist, and calling them racist and sexist because they didn't vote for Kamala Harris, it's not going to go over well the next election. And I don't understand why they keep doing this over and over again and expecting different results. They lost because of reasons like that, because of stuff like this. They lost, and they couldn't be more out of touch if they tried. They have no idea what it's like to be you, to be me, and they live in anger and chaos, and they would much rather blame half of the country for sins that they aren't guilty of, rather than take accountability for their foolish actions. Kamala Harris never talked about the issues on her campaign trail. That's why she lost. Okay, she never talked about the issues. Nobody knew who they were voting for, not to mention she jumped in like in July and didn't run in a primary and didn't gain any primary votes. People didn't like that. They thought that was strange and undemocratic. So how can none of them realize that this crap is deeply, deeply unpopular with the American people, calling people racist and sexist for no reason, just because you voted for a different political candidate? Additionally, not only is this beyond played out, but nobody buys the lies anymore. It's so tiring. It's so boring. This is the same thing that they do every single day. And according to my unprofessional opinion, Trump won for 3 main reasons: because the economy, and the fact that the left tried to gaslight Americans into believing that inflation was a myth. Okay, that only proves how little they cared about that issue, the economy. Secondly, the border and the deportation promises. So, they say that, people voted for Donald Trump because that was his main issue. Okay, and the woke nonsense, the DEI. So if everything is racist and misogynist, nothing is, which is the only thing that the left, that's the only thing that they have. They slander anyone and anything that they despise with this label of racist and misogynist, and it's getting so old. These people are so arrogant and narcissistic that they would rather blame half the country on things that don't exist, the invisible patriarchy, right? And rather than hold themselves accountable and say, hey, our campaign strategy kind of sucked. We kind of just threw Kamala Harris in at the end. And then we ran like this feeble old man who had dementia, and we expected something to come of that. And then everybody saw what it actually was at the end of that first debate with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And so we had to get a new candidate last minute. I mean, that's why you lost. I mean, common sense will tell you that's why you lost. So this cost them the election last year in 2024. It's going to cost them 2026 as well. They just continue to fail. Okay. So I'm going to be right back. I've got to talk about Hakeem Jeffries, because Hakeem Jeffries is taking the fight to the streets. You know, this rhetoric needs to come down. It needs to be toned down a little bit here, Hakeem, because that kind of rhetoric is what led to Donald Trump being almost assassinated twice. So we've got to take a quick break, but I'm going to be right back. The old DNC go-to, racism and sexism, quit with the divisive rhetoric. Even Democrats knew they had two horrible candidates. Exactly, Dave. I mean, and I am the last person who would want to help a Democrat win an election, but they are never going to win another election again if they keep this up, if they keep calling people racist, misogynist. And they've been doing this for years. I think they called Reagan Hitler. Okay, so it's just a losing strategy. Okay, when they called Reagan Hitler, it only made people want to go out and vote for him. I think Reagan only lost like one state. And you know, you're dividing people and causing people to go out there and attempt assassination on President Donald Trump's life, and attempt to take his life. Okay, presidents who are attempted to be who go through attempted assassinations, they skyrocket in the polls. Okay, people see that, and you know, if you survive an assassination attempt, you're seen as like a hero. Okay, naturally. If you're surviving, you know, a bullet, you know, and just a quarter of an inch away from your skull and killing you, Donald Trump did that, and that wouldn't have never happened had it not been for the leftist rhetoric. We don't know anything really about Thomas Crooks, whether he had help on the inside or what, at this point, but at the end of the day, whatever it was, the leftist rhetoric has contributed to this extremism that would have allowed for somebody like Thomas Crooks to, you know, not even have a second thought in getting up on that roof and trying to attempt the life of the president, and then taking the life of a Trump supporter. Okay. Then you've never heard of that at a Kamala Harris rally. Okay. Somebody being that extreme and going to, you know, these lengths of trying to kill Kamala Harris, because the rhetoric is not the same from our side of the aisle. It's just not. Republicans aren't out there calling for the assassination and calling Kamala Harris a Hitler. Okay, we haven't done that. Now, I will say that Kamala Harris is a communist. And I don't even think that she would disagree with me. She's a socialist communist, and she always has been. You could just look at some of her campaign literature over the past years. I think there was this video that she had posted when she was running as vice president alongside Joe Biden. And it was this video about socialism and, you know, equity and not equal outcomes. You know, we're all about, in a capitalist society and in America, we're all about equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. And she was posting these videos about equal outcomes and how you have to bring somebody down in order for them to have the same outcome as this person who's underperforming, and everybody has the same outcome. That's communism. Okay, so calling her Commie Kamala, not untruth, not factual, okay, and not as extreme as calling her Hitler. We didn't call her Mao or Xi Jinping. Okay, we didn't call her these names or these communist dictator names. Nobody ever called her that. She is a communist through and through, though. So, yeah, you continue with this rhetoric, you're going to see more and more people try to take Donald Trump down, and you're going to make, a martyr. You're going to make a hero out of him. The fact that you can't take him down is what's so attractive about Donald Trump to many voters. So you should just stop with the whole racism, sexism thing and trying to take Donald Trump down. Stop trying to take him down. Look in the mirror, say, what do we have to do better? Let's select candidates that aren't 80 plus years old and have cognitive decline. Let's select candidates who aren't straight up communists like Kamala Harris. Let's select a candidate prior to the primaries, okay, and have the candidate run in a primary and gain votes. Let's not hold an undemocratic election. Where a lot of Democrats, I mean, there were tons of Democrats who did not like the games that they had played in order to get Kamala Harris to be slated in there and to be the new candidate in July of 2024. Think of that. That's just July, August, September, October, November 5th. Okay, that's 4 months that they had to campaign and to get Kamala Harris out there and to explain, her stances on all kinds of things, the border. You had trans inmates in prisons. That was a stance that she had in San Francisco as a DA, that she was okay with trans inmates. That's widely unpopular with a majority of American people, having trans men, so trans women, right? Men who are pretending to be women stuck with females in prisons. Okay, that's a wildly unpopular position. She held it and she had to explain herself, and she was just so busy explaining herself in that 4 months for positions she's had in previous years that you couldn't even get to the issues. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. So do appreciate you tuning in each and every single morning. I do want to get to Hakeem Jeffries here. And everybody should understand that this assassination, there's been 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life here. And it's not going to get any better in that, we just talked about how the whole entire DNC chair panel, so the candidates, and I told you who had won, Ken Martin of Minnesota had won the chair position, and then the vice chair is David Hogg, both of which are very extreme candidates. Donald Trump isn't even all that extreme, folks. I know people say he's an extremist and he's like a dictator, Hitler, or whatever. He's actually not all that extreme. I don't agree with him on quite a lot. IVF, giving money out to individuals who are seeking IVF. I think that IVF needs to be monitored because there's all kinds of embryos that are just being discarded at extreme rates, and those are human lives. So I mean, if it takes like 50 embryos, I don't know, 10 embryos, and none of the 9 take, and then the only one takes, and you get to select what embryo you want based on its genetic makeup, and it's I mean, this kind of it runs down this road of, are we just creating embryos to discard them, and then not to mention those embryos either just freeze forever, or they're taken for scientific purposes, and then babies are performed on, little unborn babies are performed on for scientific advancement, which is just sad. We're taking baby in life, and similar to that of abortion, where they take aborted babies and then they operate on them and try to do all kinds of scientific research like they're guinea pigs. And it's just kind of sad. So I don't agree with Donald Trump on IVF. I don't agree with him on giving amnesty to DACA recipients. There's plenty that I don't agree with Donald Trump on. He's not by any means an extremist. You've got DNC candidates up there. All of the candidates were extremist in that they truly believe that Kamala Harris lost because she's a Black or a of color woman. I don't even want to say she's African American because we still don't know. But she's a woman of color, and they truly believe that that's why, and that the whole other half of the country are a bunch of racists and sexists. That's an extreme position that you hold, and all of the DNC leadership up there, they believe that. So here's Hakeem Jeffries. Again, I want to say that the assassination attempts, they're just going, if there's continued assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life, he's just going to get more popular. The more you go after this guy, the stronger he gets. And if Democrats want to win, they've got to stop with the hateful rhetoric. Take a listen. Here we go.
Focus on the need to look out for everyday New Yorkers and everyday Americans who are under assault by an extreme MAGA Republican agenda that is trying to cut taxes for billionaire donors and wealthy corporations and then stick New Yorkers and working class Americans across the country with the bill. That's not acceptable. We are going to fight it legislatively. We are going to fight it in the courts. And we're going to fight it in the streets.
Or we're going to fight it in the streets. We're either going to fight it legislatively, we're going to fight it in the courts, or we're going to fight in the streets. Now, after a couple of assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life, you would think Democrats wouldn't be calling for, you don't think that they would call for fights in the streets, but that's not the case here for the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries. I got to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, good morning. Go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. I appreciate you tuning in. Oh, sorry, the volume's too low. I'll tell you what Hakeem said. He said, we're either going to fight MAGA Republicans in the streets, or we're either going to fight them legislatively, we're either going to fight them in the courts, or we will fight them in the streets. That's what Hakeem Jeffries had said. So in a press conference on Friday, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called for Democrats to fight the Trump administration's plans in the streets, leading the White House, calling for Jeffries to apologize. So the White House immediately demanded that he apologize. The White House really had no choice here because this is may or may not be a call to violence. Okay, he said legislatively, the courts, or in the streets. Hakeem Jeffries. So this is big, and the White House called on him to, answer these questions. Will you apologize for the disgusting threat? Are you doubling down on the same calls for violence that have plagued this country for years? Are you going to keep doubling down on that? He was asked this by the White House in an official White House letterhead, and they released it because Hakeem Jeffries made this sick call for violence, and he incited his followers to fight President Donald Trump's agenda in the streets. So will he apologize? No, probably not. And the left, they have no intention of softening this rhetoric. They have no intention of toning this down. And they're doubling down on the racism, sexism, MAGA Republicans, which is so unfortunate because we should be unifying as a country. And we've got this one side that's still being very divisive. And he was the democratically elected candidate, Trump was, in the most undemocratic election in American history, where we had a woman who was selected and she didn't run in a primary, received no votes, and she was, installed really as the candidate in this election. But he won fair and square despite that. Okay, so not only can these people not, win fair and square, but they can't lose with grace. Okay, they're not losing with grace, and they're attempting to override the will of the people, and they're fighting the will of the people. So We're going to get to a few other things. Chuck Schumer talking about how Corona and avocados are going to go up in price. The tariff war, so-called tariff war, is over. Donald Trump got what he wanted, which was Canada and Mexico both contributing to policing their borders. Which was the whole intent of this, was to try to get them to police their own borders and to just have some equity, as like the socialists love to say. Really, this is just equal opportunity. The United States, we're screwed over all of the time by these two countries with the fentanyl are pouring over from both these borders. But also the subsidized lumber, subsidized crap that's coming in, and our industries can't compete with the subsidized crap. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9. Yes, Hakeem Jeffries said, hey, we're going to try to fight you legislatively. We're going to try to fight you in the courts, and we're going to try to fight you in the streets. Or we're going to have to try to fight you in the streets. This was it was a sick call for violence, if you ask me. He incited his followers to fight President Donald Trump's agenda in the streets. And after that press conference in Brooklyn, the House Minority Leader Jeffries, he was sent really a letter from the White House. They were asking him if he's going to apologize for this disgusting threat, or if he was going to double down on the calls for violence that have plagued this country for years and led to 2 assassination attempts against President Donald Trump. The left has no attempt of softening their rhetoric or toning it down. Okay, they are vowing to double down to fight Trump's agenda. Even though he was democratically elected in one of the most undemocratic elections in American history, she was installed, folks. Kamala Harris did not run in a primary and received no votes. She only ran for 4 months, and Donald Trump won. And not only can the Democrats not win fair and square, as we saw in 2020, but they also can't lose without attempting to override the will of the people. So we sucked it up. The inflation, the Afghanistan withdrawal, the border crisis, we sucked it up as conservatives and as people on the right. We sucked it up all of the 4 years Joe Biden was president, and we came out and we voted him out. And these people, they just aren't budging. They are trying to override the will of you, the people. So while the left vows to do everything in its power to stop President Donald Trump's agenda, before he's even made it to a full month in office here, I don't think he made it to a full month, it really shows you how pathetic these people are. Lose with grace. Come back strong in 2026. Come back strong in 2028. Okay? I admit you lost because you ran a woman who was an idiot, and you ran her for 4 months, and she didn't run in a primary, and she couldn't even talk about her issues, okay? She was busy defending all of her previous stances, her communist beliefs, and her radical beliefs, transgender women, aka men pretending to be women in prisons. That's what she believed in. She was always answering questions about her prior beliefs. She could never really get to issues that were affecting Americans, or her perceived issues, because apparently she just changed her mind so much that she wasn't that person anymore, I guess, in the time period of when she announced that she was going to be the candidate, right, in July. I mean, come on, folks. I mean, this was a call of violence from Hakeem Jeffries, and this stuff has got to stop, because they're going to wind up killing President Donald Trump or having more attempted assassinations on his life. I got to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Except for losing another war. I don't know what war he lost, ... question mark. But yeah, I'm glad that you're not seeing anything that he's doing wrong so far. I don't think that he's done anything wrong. Okay, one thing that he's done wrong so far was the TikTok ban. He gave them 90 days to kind of get the United States a stakeholder in TikTok, so a United States stakeholder, so that way they stop, mining United States citizens' data and taking it and, spying on us essentially through the app TikTok. And instead of being pretty harsh on China with that, he gave them an opportunity. He gave TikTok, the CEO, a chance to include American stakeholders so that way they could kind of watch and see and have a say in how TikTok is ran. So I didn't necessarily agree with that. It was like a 90-day, it was banned, right? And then he came in and kind of negotiated a deal where you have 90 days to get an American stakeholder. I had hoped, here's what I would have liked to see from Donald Trump. You keep the ban and then you wait 90 days and then you lift the ban after he does prove that he can, in fact, include American stakeholders and that he will include American stakeholders and stop spying on Americans, okay, is essentially what we're waiting for. So this 90-day ban was lifted for 90 days. I wish he would have kept the ban and then kind of like lifted the ban after those 90 days, if that makes sense. So that's probably the only thing that, Trump has done so far that I don't really like. Everything else, love it. Tariffs, Stellantis coming back. I had called that Belvedere. This plant in Illinois has been vacant for years and years under, Governor J.B. Pritzker and Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth. It's been vacant. And they try to say that it's, the UAW. The UAW is the one who, negotiated this deal with Stellantis. Stellantis is the automaker. I think they make Chrysler and Dodge, but they were like Governor J.B. Pritzker and all of them. We've worked tirelessly with side by side with UAW, the union, and they finally reached an agreement, which I don't think that they would have reached the agreement had not the Stellantis owner or like the Stellantis CEO been meeting with President Donald Trump for a couple of days in the White House. Okay, and then after those meetings, he just like randomly decided that he was going to work with the UAW. No, Donald Trump probably threatened tariffs from their new Brazil plant that they've been expanding. It was like $6 billion, I think it is, that they had planned to expand this plant in Brazil. They wanted to expand it and, invest in that plant. And Donald Trump probably threatened them with maybe tariffs or, worked it out to where, Stellantis would come back and bring the jobs back to Belvedere, Illinois. That is a huge win, specifically for you in Illinois. Having what is it? It's a Dodge truck of some kind that they're making. And it's a fuel-powered combustible engine, which is also what the UAW workers, a lot of those UAW workers, I think, went out and voted for Donald Trump, to be honest with you. Because Donald Trump had promised that they were going to be making the gas power or the combustible engines and not these electric vehicles. The electric vehicles, your hours are smaller, like you don't have as many hours, and they're not as easy to make, and the workers don't like making the electric vehicles, number one. Number two, the electric vehicles, there's no market for them, okay? There's nobody wants them, okay? We even have tax credit upon tax credit here in the state of Illinois, and when Joe Biden was president, through the Inflation Reduction Act, $7,500 extra to go buy an electric vehicle. And even with all the free money, people weren't buying electric vehicles, okay? So the UAW workers didn't want to make them. And Donald Trump said that he'd promise, this is a promises made, promises kept. He promised that he would get with these automakers and negotiate to where they'd stop making these electric vehicles. And the whole thing of that is just really stop incentivizing it with tax credits and subsidies. Ultimately, without those tax credits and subsidies from the federal government, you're not going to make that stuff. It's the same thing in the food industry. You're starting to see a lot of these food production plants and these food processing plants catch on fire, explode, because they are doing something that one is very unnatural. They're using hexane and producing seed oils, and they're making fake meat and all of that because it was incentivized by the government to do so. I hope that Donald Trump addresses that with something that might have to go through the legislature. But yeah, the the food processing plants. They were making all of these, fake foods, and there's not a market out there for them. Anytime you go into the grocery store, just walk by like the Beyond Meat aisle or like the fake meat aisle. They have an entire aisle. It is fully stocked. Nobody's ever buying that crap. And it's fake. It's all subsidized. And Donald Trump is going to go in and say, hey, no, make what works. Actually be a company. I'm not subsidizing you anymore. Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. Yes, the Democrats, they can't win fair and square as seen in 2020, but they also can't lose without attempting to override the will of the people. They can't lose with grace. Clearly, Hakeem Jeffries was out there saying, we'll fight you legislatively, or we'll fight you in the courts, or we're going to fight you in the street, Donald Trump. They're trying to fight Donald Trump before he's even made it a full month in office, and really he hasn't even done anything that bad. The only thing that I would say that I don't like that Donald Trump has done so far is the TikTok ban. I would have liked to seen it ban. He lifted the ban for 90 days, and he gave TikTok 90 days to have an American stakeholder in the company. That would, prevent any kind of, mining data and spying on Americans through this app. If we had American stakeholders invested in this company. And he gave him 90 days to do it, and he lifted the ban. I would have liked to see that ban stay in effect and then lift that ban after they've proved that they will bring American stakeholders to the table in operating TikTok. Okay, so there is stuff that I don't like about Donald Trump. I told you, IVF, I don't agree with him on that. And DACA and amnesty for DACA. I don't want to see that happen because it's unconstitutional. I do want to play this. Dems spent the last 8 years doubling down on this rhetoric, quadrupling down on it, and they're calling for fights in the streets. And you would think after a couple of assassination attempts that they'd stop doing this. Take a listen to AOC here. First, we listened to, of course, Hakeem Jeffries and him saying that he wants to take the fight to the streets. Listen to AOC screaming. And it's people like this where, you just look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and say, hey, we messed up. We ran somebody who nobody liked, and we ran her not in the primary, but we held an undemocratic election, which didn't go over favorably with the Democrat voters. Take a listen to that.
I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. And we're going to keep standing with trans people. We're going to keep standing with the LGBT community. We're going to keep standing for the working class. We're going to keep fighting for a minimum wage. We're going to keep fighting to guarantee health care. And they are just relying on us giving up. They're relying on us giving up. Hell no. Hell no. They can do what they want. They do have power. They have the White House, they have the Senate, and they have the House of Representatives. But we have our voice. We have I don't give.
And I have no problem with you protesting things that make sense. Donald Trump has done really great things. I mean, look at the Belvidere, Illinois Stellantis plant. He opened it. I knew that this was going to happen within a couple of months of Donald Trump being president, because he was going to probably slap tariffs on Stellantis, their Brazil plant that they've decided to invest in $6 billion over the course of 5 years. I don't know exactly what kind of conversations he had with the Stellantis guy, but the Stellantis guy, I don't know his name, but he was with Donald Trump for a couple of days. And shortly after that, they agreed to open up the Belvidere plant, bringing 1,500 jobs to the state of Illinois. Like, this is huge. I don't mind if you protest. Don't protest good things, number one. That's a good thing. There's plenty of good things. Canada paying for their own border security and us not having to do it anymore. That's a good thing. They're paying $1.3 billion for their own border security, finally. Mexico is also patrolling their border. 10,000 troops were deployed there. The Mexican president negotiated with President Donald Trump. They're going to try to address the fentanyl crisis and the fentanyl pouring over the American border, the Southern American border. So while they fearmonger to the masses into believing things like trans rights are under threat, like I said, trans genocide. I hate when they say that because statistically, the murder of trans people, it's not happening. People are not murdering trans people, number one, because they're trans. Number two, the only reason why trans people, and I think it's only like 30 a year or something like that on trans people, you have to remember that this is a very small minority of people in the United States. And the reason why trans people are getting murdered is because they're in fields, I don't even really want to say this, fields or occupations that are risky in that they're doing like prostitution, drug deals, things like that. They're in these spheres of a dangerous culture like prostitution. Of course, you're going to, a pimp is going to beat you up and possibly kill you in that kind of lifestyle. Okay, they're involved in lifestyles that ultimately lead to their death. Okay, and like I said, it's only like, if I had to guess, 60 maybe, tops 30 to 60 trans people die a year, or are killed a year, right? Are killed. Homicide. Okay, so nobody's going out there and killing them because they, are transgender. Nobody's like going out there and saying, you're transgender, I'm going to kill you. No, nobody's doing that. The statistics don't show it. They're contributing to a culture here that put Trump's life in jeopardy, not once, but twice. Okay, AOC, Hakeem Jeffries, and that's reprehensible. I do want to shift gears. Let's talk about Chuck Schumer. He really embarrassed himself. The trade wars have begun. The trade wars, and they're over already. They began, and now they don't exist. Donald Trump. It was never a trade war, by the way. It was Donald Trump knowing what he was doing. He slapped tariffs on Mexico and Canada because Mexico and Canada have been screwing us over. We've been patrolling their borders. We do everything for them. Canada hasn't contributed to NATO in any kind of way. We've been covering them in that. But Mexico and Canada said that they would retaliate with better tariffs, with more better tariffs on America. We're going to do more tariffs on America. And they threatened that. And that's laughable. You don't have the leverage to do that, Canada. You don't have the leverage to do that, Mexico. China's going to get their taste too, probably. I haven't seen much about China and their tariffs, but Americans, they were bracing, they were prepared for items to get a little bit more expensive. Okay, but in the long run, had this trade war actually played out, and we knew it wasn't going to play out because they had no leverage in this trade war. Okay, items, as Democrat leader Chuck Schumer points out, like beer. Some items were going to be more expensive if this trade war were to go out, and Canada was going to tariff us more than we were going to tariff them. Chuck Schumer says that we were going to pay more for beer. So this is really funny. I've invited you all here today because it's fun to make fun of the schmucky Chuck. Chuck's handlers clearly don't know what they're doing. Opinions on tariffs, yes, and their effect on policy, both economically and politically, vary. Even amongst us on the right, some of us are, pro-tariff, some of us are against tariffs. I'm pro-tariff under President Donald Trump. I don't think most presidents in our history were able to carry out what Donald Trump has been able to carry out with the art of the tariff, as I like to call it. You have to come high, you have to come strong in order to get them to do what you want. So Donald Trump came high, came strong, and he said, hey, we're going to tariff you. And you need to start patrolling your border. Otherwise, we're going to tariff you like this crazy amount, like 50% or something like that. And then they start to freak out a little bit. And, they tried to, play it off like they were going to come back and tariff America even harder, although that would probably destroy their economy over ours. We would just have to, pay a little bit more for certain items. So like I said, opinions vary on tariffs. I think that tariffs are awesome if Donald Trump is doing them. Donald Trump knows what he's doing with them, and he uses it as a negotiating tactic. And Yeah, that's my belief on tariffs. So I've brought you here because I want to make fun of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. They are all advised by Zoomers. And by Zoomers, I mean people who are Gen Z. And are just constantly on TikTok, and they rot their brain. The Zoomer brain thought that this was going to be a hit. They thought that, oh, Chuck Schumer getting up there and talking about avocados and beer, that is going to be our symbol of resistance. The Corona beer and the avocados, that's our symbol of resistance against President Donald Trump. And we want Chuck Schumer to get up there and talk about how it's going to be more expensive for Corona beer. Take a listen to this. This actually cracked me up. Here we go.
Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday, okay? It's going to affect beer.
And he's got the pop. He's got the Corona Extra in his hand. It's going to affect beer.
Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac. Because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
Okay, so Chuck Schumer, sorry, buddy, you should have left the props at home. Leave it to the prop comedy experts, okay? And you would think that the Gen Zers who are running this guy, because like somebody like from his campaign or somebody from his office, they were like Gen Z TikToker, and they were like, hey, bring out a Corona beer and bring out an avocado, and then that's going to be our symbols of resistance. Those are going to be our symbols of resistance against President Donald Trump, and we'll make a meme out of it. I don't know why they don't take they don't look in the mirror. They don't remember this unfortunate grilling incident. Clearly, I want to share this with you. This is hilarious. This is Chuck Schumer grilling, and you guys remember this. He put cheese on a raw burger, and he was grilling these burgers, and clearly the burgers are raw, and he put cheese on it. So that tells you that he's not an average, like what he was doing here. He was trying to act like he was like one of you grilling in your backyard. He goes, my daughter and my wife, we bought a house with a backyard for the first time, and we love having barbecue with the hot dogs and the hamburgers on the grill. Father's Day heaven. And he's got a piece of cheese on a raw burger, like on the grill here. And it's just so disingenuous. So Chuck Schumer, he, in the Chuckleheads running his comms operation there, do they even know that a lot of the beer comes from America? He's talking about Corona. Yes, that comes from Mexico, but you can argue Trump's tariffs as much as you want, but the one area that it won't affect is probably beer. If you live anywhere in the United States, do you live anywhere in the United States? Great. You probably live near 5 local breweries. Okay, that's one thing Americans have is beer. And the tariff is not going to be slapped on your neighborhood brewer or your local brewer. The tariffs might affect Corona, maybe, if that's your only beer brand that you're drinking. And in that case, I'm sorry, your taste is terrible. But yeah, I mean, Chuck Schumer doesn't know anything about life outside of DC. Outside of his elitism, he doesn't know that, you have a local brewer probably that you go to, that Corona isn't your only beer brand, okay? And like I said, this is kind of like silly because we all know that the trade war is over. And if there even was a trade war, there really wasn't. Canada and Mexico tried to pretend to be tough, but then they bent the knee, and they were like, Trump won. So I get what Democrats are trying to do with Chuck Schumer and the Corona and the avocado. We had a lot of fun talking about how expensive things were under Joe Biden, particularly during Thanksgiving and the Super Bowl, and the 4th of July barbecues. The difference is here, the people who control Joe Biden put forth policies at best that made things more expensive, as an unintended consequence or as a intended consequences, I believe. They wanted to, make you suffer with the Inflation Reduction Act and with the American Rescue Plan Act. That's what made things so expensive. Those two policies, it was spending money. Okay. Donald Trump, what he's trying to do is get money via the tariff so you don't have to pay exorbitant amounts of taxes. And we're going to get these people to pay their fair share, these foreign countries. So the increase with Trump's tariffs would have only temporarily made some things maybe more expensive. Like I said, the trade war is over. I mean, even if you want to call it a trade war, it wasn't even really a trade war. They had tried to act all tough, Canada saying that they were going to tariff us more than we would have tariffed them, which was just silly because they didn't have the leverage. And had they had tariffed us more, I don't think that it would have hurt them. They didn't have the leverage. So my suggestion is always buy made in America. Try to buy as many made in America things. I know I do. Things that are not subject to tariffs. That's an option as well. Had this not been over, it only would have affected some items. And you could have always opted into the American-made version, and that was always an option for you. So I got to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat on Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. Hey, good morning. Go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. Oh, sorry. Let me get Chuck off of here. Chuckles. Chuck Schumer. Trump's in a drug war. Kids Table was talking about drug wars, trade wars. Yeah. He's steamrolling them. They can barely keep up. Yeah. So, Donald Trump, I mean, it's clear that he won this so-called trade war. I don't even really want to call it a trade war because nothing ever really happened. And Donald Trump knew that that was going to happen. They had one phone call, okay? Donald Trump and the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And Trudeau, shortly after, this announcement of the tariffs and tariffing Canada, they had said like, oh, we're going to tariff you even harder, which was pretty much laughable. But, shortly after they had come out all big and strong, they, did exactly what Donald Trump wanted, which was, their border plan, the $1.3 billion border plan. Nearly 10,000 troops are going to be dispatched to safeguard the border under President Donald Trump's pressure. That's the result of Donald Trump's pressure. 10,000 troops on the Canadian border, the northern border, and on the southern border of Mexico. So Trudeau concedes 30-day delay on the U.S. He says proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together. So there are not going to be any tariffs that Canada implements. It's not going to really affect prices as of right now. And even if there were, the tariffs and he didn't concede the tariffs, it would have only affected a few items. And you could have always opted into the American-made brand or the American-made product. And that would have been just fine. Now, as a result of Donald Trump's pressure here, there are major wins. We are combating crime of the flow of fentanyl into the country at the northern border and at the southern border. So I'm suspecting we're going to see fentanyl deaths decrease because of this move. And that's probably exactly why Donald Trump started all of this. He wanted to address the fentanyl crisis, and this was the easiest way to do it, was to get people to actually, patrol their own borders and to stop the flow of fentanyl coming into America, because we treat Canada and Mexico very well in that, we are providing military assistance to them. We're like the world's police. We provide military assistance to pretty much everyone. And, here's what Donald Trump says. Today, I've implemented a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, 10% on Canadian energy. For example, the Canadian energy, they actually were selling it at a discounted rate. This oil, it was raw oil. We weren't refining it, or we were refining it ourselves. They weren't refining it and shipping it in. So it was actually way more work for us. We don't rely on Canadian energy, by the way, at all. We could easily just open up one of our pipelines and refine that oil, and it would take us as much work, right? we were getting this raw oil at a discounted price because they weren't refining it, and it was raw oil, and it was kind of like, I guess we'll take it. I guess we'll take it. We'll pay a little bit for it. I mean, they were pretty much giving it to us for like $1, okay, essentially. So he says this was done through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act because the major threat of illegal aliens and deadly drugs killing our citizens, including fentanyl. So this was his reasoning for these tariffs. He said, look, I'm going to tariff you unless you decide to address what's going on at your borders where there's fentanyl pouring into the states, and I don't want that. He says, it is my duty as president to ensure the safety for all. I made a promise on my campaign to stop the flood of illegals and drugs pouring in over our borders, and Americans overwhelmingly voted for it. Now with the Mexico president, Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, it was a very friendly conversation wherein she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers at the border. So there they are. They're paying for the border security at the southern border. Fast forward to 2025. He actually, promises made, promises kept. Mexico is going to pay for the border. There they are, paying for the border. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants coming into your country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for 1 month period, during which we have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating with those negotiations with President Sheinbaum, and we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries. Art of the deal. President Donald Trump doing the art of the deal. Good morning. It's Tuesday, and coming up in just about 4 minutes, Rick Johnson from Tax and Accounting Plus will be joining me with your Tax Tip Tuesday. Every Tuesday at around 7:30, we're going to be doing Tax Tip Tuesdays with Rick Johnson because guess what, folks? Tax season is here. Coming up, I do want to talk a little bit about CBS Face the Nation. Her name is Margaret Brennan. Okay, now you guys might remember, the embarrassing moment she had with Vice President J.D. Vance. You guys remember where, we no longer call Karens anymore. We call them Margarets. This is just part of this embarrassing interview that Margaret did with J.D. Vance. This was his first interview as vice president, by the way. Margaret Brennan of CBS, she tried to, stump J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance just completely annihilated her. Take a listen to this. Here we go.
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people
it's not
are vetted.
Good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted. And many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted. And because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country. And I think most Americans agree with me.
We'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay, so he goes, I don't really care, Margaret. I don't really care. So coming up, we are going to be talking about how she had this rub with a Florida congressman. His name is Brian Mast, and he's really good at handling the libs and owning the libs. Okay, so he made an appearance on one of our shows. I think it was Face the Nation, CBS, but the focus was DEI. Trump in his executive order era. He's busy signing, of course, EOs that are undoing all of Joe Biden's EOs, which undid all of Trump's EOs, which undid all of Barack Obama's EOs. The next Democrat president is probably going to do the same thing. They're going to try to undo all of Trump's new EOs. This is just how the game is played now. We have to accept it for what it is. But many of Trump's EOs are pausing the money going out the door to a lot of these DEI programs set up by President Joe Biden. And much of that money has been spent on the people who, controlled Joe Biden's woke political agenda. Okay, so I don't even want to say Joe Biden's woke political agenda. The people who controlled Joe Biden had a woke political agenda, and a lot of the federal dollars were going towards these DEI things. And Margaret Brennan, she's on with this Florida congressman, and we'll get to him in just a second. But folks, right now, it's time for Tax Tip Tuesday. Rick Johnson from Tax and Accounting Plus is joining me here on the live stream. You guys can check it out. Rick Johnson, welcome to the program. I'm so excited for Tax Tip Tuesday. We haven't done these in so long.
I know it kind of just caught up to us very quickly. But thank you, Kat, for having me on the show again this year, and we'll get to do that for a few Tuesdays coming up.
Yeah, so today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about education credits and deductions, specifically the American Opportunity Credit, the Lifetime Learning Credit, and the deduction for interest on education loans. So tell me a little bit about that and how we can maximize our deductions, right? And have more money in our pocket. Inflation was pretty tough this last year. So bust inflation with Tax and Accounting Plus. Rick Johnson, he'll help you find all the deductions. So let's talk about education credits.
Okay, education credits. We have actually 2 credits and 1 deduction this year that we're going to be speaking of. And please keep in mind that deduction is the lesser of the 2. If you get a choice, most of the time, that credits are going to work out better. Credits, you get dollar for dollar back. Deductions, it's whatever your tax bracket you're in that you save. So if you have a $1 deduction and you're in the 22% bracket, then you're only going to save yourself 22 cents on $1, right? Whereas with a credit, if you have a $1 credit, it wipes out $1 worth of tax. So we'll start off with the 2 credits, and the one I call the big boy is the American Opportunity Credit. All right, the credit for the American Opportunity will allow you to have $2,500, up to $2,500 for credit. The first $2,000 that you spend, you get 100% back. The next $2,000, you get 25% back, and that's how you come up with the $2,500. Also, the good part about that is that 40% of that $2,500 can come back as additional, as in part of your refund. Okay, a lot of these credits only wipe out tax. If that once your tax is wiped out, then you can't increase your refund. But the opportunity credit, you can. So now, keep in mind too that these credits and stuff that we're going to be talking about today always have limitations. The IRS, that's what makes it so difficult is, maybe everybody knows the general stuff, but knowing that there's all these exceptions and stuff out there, that's what makes it tougher. And for the American Opportunity Credit, one of the exceptions or limitations is the amount of money you make. Okay, your adjusted gross income, once as a single person or in a household, once you get to $80,000, yes, as a single or head household, then it begins to go away. All right. Once you and for a married couple, that's $160,000. Now, once you increase that to 90 for a single and head household, and for $160 for a married filing joint, then it all goes away. You make too much money, they take the credit away, you don't get it. Okay. American Opportunity Credit does have a few other perks or whatever, maybe not perks, but situations where you cannot take the credit if you don't meet these qualifications. The student has to be enrolled in a program that leads to a degree, certificate, or other recognized educational credential. And you have to be in class or in school at least what they consider to be a half of the normal full-time workload. Okay. For the course of study, the academic period during the calendar year, your qualified expenses will also include your tuition, your enrollment fees, course-related books, supplies, and equipment. So that's $2,500 you can get back when you file your return if you can qualify for the American Opportunity Credit. Yeah. Now we have the Lifetime Learning Credit.
Lifetime?
Lifetime. That's it. There's no limitation. See, you can only, with American Opportunity Credit, you can only get it 4 times. Okay.
Oh.
So usually one for each year that you're in school under normal circumstances. But the lifetime learning credit, they just kind of open the doors on that one. And it doesn't matter how many courses you take or how long or et cetera. You can be 90 years old, take one course and get a credit for that one course. Okay. Qualifications for that is you get 20% of the first 10,000. So you can get up to $2,000 credit. It's also, it is not based on workload. Like I said, you can just do one course and it's only there's no limit on the number of years. Now the limitations on those are the same as the American Opportunity Credit as far as income. If your income gets up to 80 for single head of household and 160 for married filing joint, then that lifetime credit starts going away. And once you reach 90 and 180 for married filing joint, it's gone. Bye-bye. It's over. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
No money for you. Okay. So we have a deduction now?
Yes, we do. And
okay.
It's one that's been around quite a while, and hopefully it won't go away, but they just don't increase it. And that's, that's called the, deduction for student loan interest or interest on student loans. Okay. The way that works is you can, the first $2,500 that you spend on student loans and interest, it's only the interest, then you can take that as a deduction. Now keep in mind a deduction only brings you down the amount that you're in, whatever tax bracket you're in. You don't get it dollar for dollar. Okay. As I said, the interest paid on that is $2,500. That's the max you can take. Again, subject to limitations. If you make more than $80,000, 165 married filing joint, then that goes away. You can't take it. Once you get to 95,000 single and head of household, and then 195,000 married filing joint, it's gone too. So, but still, it's a good time. People are really thinking about education stuff right now because everybody's running around wanting to get their tax returns done because they're in that FAFSA. They got to get those filled out so they can get some help. So, but keep in mind when you're doing your taxes coming up, there's some credits and deductions available for education. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next Tuesday.
Okay. So. Well, before we go, I do want, for our listeners, can you explain the difference between a credit and a deduction?
Okay, a credit and deduction. All right, a credit you get back dollar for dollar. Okay, so when you're doing your tax return, if you owe $1,000 in taxes, and when you get down to that point in your return, if you have a credit, if you have $1,000 credit, you wipe out those taxes. Okay, so it goes dollar for dollar. So that's a good one. That's like 100% return on whatever your credit is, as long as you have tax for it to wipe out. Some credits allow you just to wipe out your tax or bring it down lower, but you can't add it to your refund. If you have a credit that's more than the taxes that you owe, some credits are refundable. In other words, if you have $1,000 in tax and you have a $2,000 credit, boom, wipe out the tax for $1,000. They'll add another $1,000 to your refund. Deduction, it's not dollar for dollar. It's just whatever tax bracket you're in. So, like I said, if you're in a 22% tax bracket, then you have that deduction. So if you have $1,000 deduction, you are only going to get it to lower 22% of your taxes, so $220. So credit, you get the $1,000. Deduction, you save yourself $22 or $220 if you're in that particular tax bracket.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rick Johnson from Tax and Accounting Plus. Rick Johnson, how do we find out more about Tax and Accounting Plus and how you guys can help us with our taxes this year?
All right. Well, Kat, we are have a website at taxandaccountingplus.com. We are located at 501 North Clinton Street here in Bloomington. And our phone number is 309-827-4010. And we kind of beefed up our staff a little bit this year. And so we have a few growing pains here and there, but we're getting them all worked out. And we're really looking forward to it. Everybody's ready to go. So it's been started. I don't know if everybody knows this. I meant to say this. January 27th was the first day that the IRS started accepting and processing returns. So we've been in this now a week, and it's taken off really, really well. So
now you don't find out the tax filing deadline until later in the tax season, right?
No,
So
it'll be 15th.
Oh, it's
April
the 15th.
Yeah, April 15th it's over, and it depends. If you're an individual, it's April 15th. But if you're like a corporation or some, or that type of situation, it can be anywhere from March 15th or April 15th as well. But you always have your extensions if you're running behind, which a lot of people tend to do. So
I say get it done. What do you think? Should people get it done right away?
there's different thoughts
Sooner
on
than
that.
later?
Yeah, there's different thoughts, really. Some people think that get it in before the IRS kind of gets rolling and get it done. But a lot of people have the mindset that file the extension and get your 6 months because they're thinking, the IRS, they may pull who they want to audit early. So they're going to try to wait them out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey, Rick Johnson from Tax and Accounting Plus, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Kat. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk again on Tuesday, folks. You won't want to miss it because, man, that is an explosive segment we do each and every single at 7:30. So we're going to be right back, folks. I've got more news ahead. You're listening to Cities 92.9. Woohoo! Hey, good morning. You're listening to Conservative Get on Cities 92.9, the news and talk Bloomington Normal. Yes, you can text me anytime, 309-451-9299. You can also throw your questions in the comments or any kind of comments on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Hey, Kat, I'm listening and I'm making beef soup. Yesterday would have been a terrible day for soup. Today, it's a little bit cooler. It's 27 degrees. Yesterday, it was like 67 degrees at one point. And I was like, man, it feels like summer. It feels great out here. I went for a walk in a short sleeve shirt. So making beef soup early in the morning. You guys can text me anytime. Now, I did want to chat about Margaret Brennan. Margaret Brennan, she's from CBS. We know her as OK Margaret, whatever. I don't really care, Margaret. JD Vance was on with her and completely owned her. This congressman, Florida Congressman Brian Mast, he's really good at owning the libs too, just like JD Vance. And their focus was on DEI. So many of EO's Trump has signed his focus on pausing money that's going out the door. And his team wants to have a chance to review the money going out the door. What are we spending money on? Okay, that's what Donald Trump is focusing on via these EOs. And a lot of money has been spent on, the people who used to control Joe Biden. It's been spent on their woke political agenda. I don't even really want to call it Joe Biden's woke political agenda because we know he wasn't running anything. And Brennan played this smug, what kind of evidence do you have card. Take a listen to this exchange on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan and this Florida Congressman Brian Mast. Here we go.
Purging of people throughout the State Department, other agencies, where we're freezing aid. These are all very important and necessary steps to make sure that we secure America, and we're going to support that.
I'm sorry, can I follow up on what you just said there? You want to authorize purging of State Department personnel? What does that mean exactly?
Well, if you want to take a look at the State Department, where DEI has been a priority over, let's say, diplomacy in many accounts, I could give you hundreds of examples of where they were authorizing. What proof do you have of that? Sure, let's list them off. $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal, $50,000 to do, a transgender opera in Colombia, $47,000 to do an LGBTQ trans comic book in Peru, $20,000 a pop to do drag shows in Ecuador. Shall I continue with more examples of where DEI was the priority?
It certainly seems like there could be a review of things. Foreign aid, as you know, is less than 1% of the entire federal budget. So we're talking small amounts of money by comparison.
We're still talking was purging of
small amounts of money by comparison. I'm sorry, but $50,000 to do a drag show in Ecuador? Like, come on. Like, that's where my tax dollars are going? All of these things add up, and this is further reason as to why the Trump team is pausing expenditures until the Trump team can review the books and get a sense of how much money we're actually wasting. And we're funding the people who controlled Joe Biden. They tried to hide this. Okay, they tried to hide the $50,000 to Ecuador for drag shows. And there's so much more. I mean, what was it? $47,000 to do an LGBTQ trans comic book in Peru and to launch that. We had $50,000 to expand, $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal. Okay, so all of these expenditures add up, and we're wasting money. We also waste money on the USAID, and I'm going to get to that here in just a second. You're listening to Conservative Cat Cities 92.9. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, so we are going to be talking about the USAID, and I want to play this for you because they have been running a global internet censorship program, okay? And this is why Donald Trump has kind of rearranged this agency, and we've now got Mark Rubio, the Secretary of State, overseeing this agency, because this agency, let's just say it was a progressive agency that they used to, not only censor Americans via the internet, okay, but they also used this to fund COVID research in Wuhan, China, which probably contributed to the outbreak, okay, or could not have contributed to the outbreak, the funding of the USAID. So let's take a listen to this clip here. I want to get to this. This talks about the censorship of that agency and how they were involved in mass censorship. Here we go.
Disinformation has invaded online conversations on social media platforms, posing challenges to healthy information environments and threats to democracy. It bolsters authoritarians, weakens democratic voices and participation, exploits and exacerbates existing social cleavages, and silences opposition. Countering disinformation and promoting information integrity are necessary priorities for ensuring democracy can thrive. The CEP's Countering Disinformation Guide is a resource including 9 thematic sections and a comprehensive database of interventions, highlighting various approaches for advancing information integrity and strengthening societal resilience to disinformation and other harmful online campaigns. The International Foundation for Electoral Systems, International Republican Institute, and National Democratic Institute developed this guide with support from USAID through the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening. Here are 9 key takeaways from the guide. Addressing disinformation requires a whole-of-society approach. We need to create a sense of urgency to drive collective action for addressing disinformation.
Collective action, also communist.
Institutions and platforms have the resources to address disinformation, but lack credibility, whereas civil society has the credibility, but is chronically under-resourced. Countering disinformation requires a mixed methods approach, including fact-checking, monitoring, and other interventions.
Censoring.
Focusing on major events like election outcomes alone will not achieve a healthy information environment. Developing norms and standards, legal and regulatory frameworks, and better social media content moderation is necessary for a healthy information ecosystem. It is important to establish frameworks to discourage political parties from engaging in disinformation. Not sure where to start? Click here to...
Okay, so I wanted to play that. I know it was a really creepy-esque video. But that's what the USAID does. They did and it stands for the United States Agency for International Development, okay? And this was supposed to be an independent agency, but really, I think it's more like communism, collective action, civil society, or society as a whole, right? These are all buzzwords for communism, censoring Americans, and political dissent. So dissent of the establishment party. And when I say establishment party, I mean Republicans and Democrats, your Nikki Haley's and your Kamala Harris's and Joe Biden's. Okay, so if you dissent from the political establishment in any kind of way and you're a populist like President Donald Trump or a MAGA Republican, you are on the hit list for censorship. Period. So we know that Mark Zuckerberg admitted that, okay, that they censored conservatives. He's come out and admitted it now. We know that because Elon Musk purchasing Twitter, it was purchasing evidence that they had censored conservatives specifically. Good, good. That's what I say about getting rid of the U.S. AID. Okay, and everybody might be confused about what they actually do. This is the United States Agency for International Development. Okay, and this is supposed to be an independent agency of the United States that primarily is responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance. Okay, so they were providing aid to, I mean, this was an operation, folks. To censor Americans. There was an operation to censor Americans, and the USAID was running a global internet censorship program. Okay, and then they pulled together hundreds of NGOs, censorship NGOs, into a common network. And then they funded those NGOs with the aid. Okay, and a lot of these are foreign NGOs, and these are NGOs who are foreign, and they have an interest in censoring political dissent in the United States. Okay, so that's what the USAID did, and Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio said that they have to bring this agency under control, and that's why Donald Trump gave Marco Rubio kind of purview over this agency. But Elon Musk said that Trump agrees to shut down the USAID. I would love to just see it shut down. I mean, I know that it's in Marco Rubio's hands right now, but I would just love to see it shut down, because not only did they censor Americans by funding all of these foreign NGOs, these censorship NGOs, but they also funded research in Wuhan, China. They funded COVID-19 research. This is absolutely incredible. I'm going to let you take a listen to this. This is Rand Paul a few years ago questioning Samantha Powell, the USAID administrator, about the foreign aid, or about aid to this research being done in Wuhan, China.
There was the PREDICT program with which you're familiar, which ended in China in 2019.
This is a $200 million program, and the GAO has also identified that some of these grants went directly to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where there is a suspicion that the lab leak began the pandemic. Has USAID awarded funds to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences in China?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd have to get
I think the answer is, once again, yes. GAO has found that there have been subawards of NIH money, as probably as well as USAID money, that went to the Academy of not just medical research, military medical research in China. Now, part of the unknowns here is we can't get the records to look at this. So I've been asking for months and months for records. In September of last year, I wrote Ms. Powers, USAID, a request asking for records from the PREDICT program. These are not classified. These are simply records of scientific research. And we want to read the grants to find out what they were doing and whether the research was dangerous or not.
Okay, so the USAID, they're funding the coronavirus research done in Wuhan, China. Obviously, that killed thousands upon millions of people. Okay, the coronavirus. So, yeah, if you contributed to that, then yeah, I think you should be disbanded. I think that it shouldn't even be a thing, the USAID. Also, the USAID, they contributed to NGOs, foreign NGOs, and these foreign NGOs obviously have an interest in destroying America and destroying political dissent from the establishment party. So yeah, down with USAID, down with the USAID. All right, you guys have a blessed rest of your day. Bye-bye. I love you. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll do it all over again tomorrow morning, bright and early at 6 a.m. Catch you later.